Good to have you join me on the news. The news says Moscow launches massive air raid on Kyiv. Man attacks diners in New Zealand, kills 4. Ukraine says biggest blow coming in counter-offensive. Stop illegal settlements in Palestine. Guterres to Israel, and over notorious refugee policies, families seek United Nations help. Stay with me for this and more stories. Talking Russian-Ukraine war, Russia has launched a series of air attacks across Ukraine targeted at Kyiv and cities from east to west. According to preliminary information, the General Staff of Ukraine's Armed Forces said Ukraine's air defense systems shot down 28 out of 30 Iranian-made Shahed drones that Russia launched on Tuesday. About 20 enemy targets were identified and destroyed by Ukrainian forces and air defense in the airspace around Kyiv. Serhiy Popko, head of the Kyiv military administration, said on the Telegram messaging app. Another massive air attack on the capital, he wrote, adding that it was the first attack on the city in 18 days to use Shahed drones. Air raid sirens could be heard for nearly 4.5 hours in the early hours of morning in Kyiv and for several hours in many other parts of the country. The military administration of Lviv, a city of about 700,000 people that lies about 70 kilometers, 43 miles from the border with Poland, said explosions were heard about 5 o'clock a.m. and that Russia hit critical infrastructure in the city, sparking a fire. According to preliminary reports, there were no casualties. There were also missile attacks in Zaporizhia region in the southeastern Ukraine, where Yuria Malashko, head of the military administration, said Russia targeted telecommunication infrastructure as well as agricultural and farming properties in its raids. No casualties were reported in the Zaporizhia raids. 3 Shahed drones were also shot down over the southern region of Mykolaiv, Governor Vitaly Kim said on Telegram. It was not possible to independently verify the report. There was no immediate comment from Russia. In Auckland, New Zealand's largest city, a man wielding an axe has attacked diners at 3 Chinese restaurants, wounding at least 4 people, according to police and witnesses. 3 victims remain in hospital in stable condition, while a 4th was discharged, spokesperson for the North Shore and Auckland hospitals said on Tuesday. According to reports, the man went into 3 Chinese restaurants, Zangliang Malatang, used Dumpling Kitchen and Maya Hotspot in the North Auckland suburb of Albany, and started randomly attacking people with an axe at about 9 p.m. on Monday. Police said a 24-year-old suspect was arrested at the scene and later charged with wounding with the intention of causing grievous bodily harm. The man, a Chinese national, made a brief appearance in court on Tuesday. Inspector Stephen Sagar, the Waitemata East Area Commander, acknowledged how frightening this was for those involved. He said police believe it was an isolated incident, adding that there was no evidence to suggest this is a racially motivated attack. The diner said, according to reports, that he was eating dinner with a friend when the man walked in and started attacking his friend, who was seriously wounded. I was in shock when I realized what was happening. He tried to target me, the man, who asked not to be named, reports said. I blocked his axe with my hand. He was also trying to target my head, so I blocked the axe with my hand. The diner said the man with the axe chased them out of the restaurant and then turned around and walked into another restaurant. According to more reports of what appeared to be a wood splitter style axe lying on the sidewalk, surveillance show. More surveillance footage posted, according to reports, showed people fleeing from one of the restaurants, including one person who escaped backwards holding a chair as a barricade, followed closely by another person holding a weapon. Police said they expect to file more charges against him, who they believe acted alone. During his court appearance, the suspect was held by a Chinese language interpreter. He was not required to enter a plea. He was granted temporary name suppression, a common outcome in New Zealand's legal system. Again, on Russia-Ukraine war, according to Ukraine's Deputy Defense Minister Hanna Maliar, the biggest blow in Kyiv's counter-offensive campaign against Russian forces has yet to come, but admitted the operation is difficult as Moscow is throwing all its can into the battle to prevent Ukraine from pressing forward. Ukraine started the first stage of its long-rumored counter-offensive 2 weeks ago to reclaim land occupied by Russian forces, but amid reports of slow progress by Ukraine's forces and stiff resistance by Russia, officials in Moscow have claimed the Ukrainian offensive has failed. The Ukrainian military, which has maintained a strict silence about the campaign in general, announced on Monday that small victories had been achieved and 8 villages liberated so far, along with some 113 square kilometers, 70 square miles of territory. The biggest blow is yet to come, Malia said on Monday. The ongoing operation has several objectives and the military is fulfilling these tasks, she wrote on the Telegram messaging app. The enemy will not easily give up their positions and we must prepare ourselves for a tough duel, she said. In fact, that is what is happening at the moment. Russian President Vladimir Putin said last week that the Ukrainian counteroffensive did not have any meaningful success, but some Russian military bloggers say Kyiv has made small gains at the expense of huge troop and equipment losses. While it is impossible to independently verify the military operation along the most contentious points of the front line, according to reports, it was able to ascertain that the Ukrainian forces have advanced in the early phase of the counter-offensive. Israel-Palestinian conflict. Antonio Guterres, United Nations Secretary General, has called on Israel to quickly cease all settlement activities in occupied Palestinian territory, describing Israel's plans to advance the building of Israeli settlements as driving tensions and violence and being a major obstacle to lasting peace. The United Nations chief's comments come after 5 Palestinians were killed, including a 15-year-old boy, and over 90 were wounded in the fiercest clashes in years, which erupted when Israeli forces raided the Jenin refugee camp in the occupied West Bank on Monday. In the first such instance in almost 20 years, Israel sent helicopter gunships which fired rockets at targets in Jenin camp, while Palestinian fighters fought for hours with small arms and explosive devices that disabled several Israeli military vehicles, trapping troops inside. 8 Israeli soldiers were wounded in the clashes that last nearly 10 hours, according to eyewitnesses. Farhan Haq, deputy spokesperson for the Secretary General, said in a statement on Monday that the Secretary General reiterates that settlements are a flagrant violation of international law. The expansion of these illegal settlements is a significant driver of tensions and violence and deepens humanitarian needs, Haq said. It further entrenches Israel's occupation of Palestinian territory, encroaches on Palestinian land and natural resources, hampers the free movement of the Palestinian population, and undermines the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people to self-determination and sovereignty, the United Nations chief said, according to him. Haq said that Guterres was deeply troubled by Israel's decision to amend settlement planning procedures that will speed up plans for new settlements in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, as well as the advancement of over 4,000 settlement housing units by Israel's planning authorities. For closely a decade, Australia's notorious hardline asylum regime has forcibly separated refugee families, but a group of refugees are now challenging the practice of family separation through the United Nations. In 2012, Maya, who is 35 years old, and her mother and siblings fled Iran, arriving in Australia a year later after a difficult journey through Malaysia and Indonesia. Maya is one of 13 families involved in the largest ever United Nations complaint against the Australian government over its refugee policies. Initiated in 2018, they submitted their final evidence and legal arguments in March and now awaiting the decision of the United Nations Human Rights Committee. There is no time frame for the ruling, although the families hope it will not take several more years. In their complaints, the families argue that the Australian government had breached its obligations and their rights under the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, ICCPR, by forcibly separating them from family members who had settled in Australia. The committee instructed the Australian government to urgently reunite the families while the complaint process was underway. The government of then Prime Minister Scott Morrison did not conform, but as a result of short-lived policy permitting urgent medical evacuations from Nauru, many of the families were reunited in Australia anyway, including Maya's. But they remain at risk of separation because those subjected to offshore processing still have no right to reside in Australia permanently and are being pushed towards resettlement in third countries such as New Zealand or the United States. A senior lawyer at the Human Rights Law Center, Josephine Langbairn, who filed the complaints on behalf of the families, who together include 63 refugees and asylum seekers, say successful Australian governments have deliberately kept refugee families apart for more than a decade as a form of punishment and deterrence. And these are more stories on climate crisis. Report says Himalayan glaciers could lose 75% of ice. Scientists have said glaciers in Asia's Hindu Kush Himalaya are melting at unprecedented rates and could lose up to 75% of their volume by century's end, warning of dangerous flooding and water shortages for closely 2 billion people who live downstream of the rivers that originate in the mountainous region. On Tuesday, the report from Kathmandu-based International Center for Integrated Mountain Development, ICIMOD, cautioned that flash floods and avalanches will grow more likely in coming years if greenhouse gases are not sharply reduced. It said that the availability of fresh water will also be affected for 240 million people who live in the Himalayan region, as well as a further 1.65 billion who live downstream of the 12 rivers that originate in the mountains. Amina Maharjan said, a migration specialist and one of the report's authors, said the people living in these mountains who have contributed next to nothing to global warming are at high risk due to climate change. Current adaptation efforts are wholly insufficient, and we are extremely concerned that without greater support, these communities will be unable to cope, adding that various reports earlier have showed that the chrysosphere regions on Earth covered by snow and ice are among the worst affected by climate change. Recent research found that Mount Everest glaciers, for example, have lost 2,000 years of ice in just the past 30 years. In Africa, local observers respond to referendum vote in Mali. The chairman of the Model Mali Observation Mission gave on Monday an overview of the voting process as Malians await the results of Sunday's referendum on a fresh constitution. The disenfranchisement of voters living in the northern region of Kidal, which is controlled by former rebels, is extremely contested. Model Mali says its observers witnessed did not vote there. There was no vote in Kidal, Tessalith, Angolohok, Ashiboko, Tenasako, Dr. Ibrahim Sango said. The coalition Port Law Observation Citoyen des Elections au Mali, COCEM, another observer group, reported that none of its observers had noted the opening of voting centers and polling stations in the Kidal region. According to reports from the regional branch of the authority in charge of elections, IAJE, in Kidal, also stated that the referendum could not be held throughout the region. The president of the AIJE at national level, Mustafa SMCC, rejected these assertions, maintaining in a press release that the vote had indeed taken place in the Kidal region. He denounced the propagation of false documents and information relayed by individuals with no standing to speak on behalf of the body. Whether or not the vote will be held in Kidal, a stronghold of armed groups that fought the central state before signing a fragile peace agreement with it in 2015, was being closely scrutinized. Model Mali is the team of observers from civil society groups funded by the European Union. The group reported a 28% turnout in the polling stations, where its 3,075 observers were deployed. Dr. Sango insisted on the credibility of local observers, and also the local observers reported that over 80 polling stations in Mopti, in the center of the country, were not open due to insecurity. The group said that a terrorist attack had disrupted voting in Bodio Mopti region, but did not give further details. In Menaka, a northern region contending with rebels related to the Islamic State group, voting was restricted to its capital due to insecurity, local elected officials said. Turnout was typically low in the country of 21 million, will be seen as an indicator of the junta's ability to restore stability and generate popular enthusiasm for its agenda. Results are expected in the coming days. Let's take a quick break. When I come back, I'll bring you more stories. Stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. On stories from Nigeria, Tinubu appoints new service chiefs. Yesterday, President Bola Tinubu carried out a major shake-up of the nation's security structure with the abrupt retirement of all the service chiefs and the Inspector General of Police, Usman Baba. Affected also are special advisors and the Comptroller General of the Nigeria Customs Service, according to a statement by the Director of Information, Office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Willie Basi, a former theatre commander. Operation Hadenkai, Major General Christopher Musa has replaced General Loki Rabo as the Chief of Defense Staff. Likewise, Major General Taurid Lagbaja is now the Chief of Army Staff. He replaced Lieutenant General Farouk Yahaya. Air Vice Marshal H.B. Abubakar was named the Chief of Air Staff in place of Air Marshal Oludayo Amao, and Rear Admiral E.A. Ogalla will take over from Vice Admiral Awal Gambo as the Chief of Naval Staff. On January 26, 2021, Buhari appointed Irabo, Amao Gambo, and the late Chief of Army Staff Ibrahim Atahiru. Atahiru, who died in a plane crash, was replaced by Yahaya, who was appointed on May 27, 2021. Also, Deputy Inspector General of Police Kayode Egbetokun has been appointed as the acting IG, while Major General Ekpa Undende is the acting Chief of Defense Intelligence. Last week, Nuhu Ribadu, who was appointed as the Security Advisor to the President, has been elevated as the National Security Advisor. He replaced Major General Babangana Mungono, retired, who was appointed in July 2015 by ex-President Muhammadu Buhari. The President also approved Colonel Adebisi Osanaya as the Brigade of Guards Commander, Lieutenant Colonel Moshood Abiodun Yusuf, Commander 7 Guards Battalion, Asokoro, Abuja, and Lieutenant Colonel Awelu Baba Inuwa, Commander 177 Guards Battalion, Kefi, Nasarawa State. Others are Lieutenant Colonel Muhammad J. Abdul Karim as Commander 102 Guards Battalion, Suleja, Niger State, and Lieutenant Colonel Olumide A. Akingbese Sote as Commander 176 Guards Battalion, Gwagwalada, Abuja. Similarly, the President approved the appointment of all the military officers in the presidential villa. They include Major Isa Farouk Audu, N/14695, Commanding Officer State House Artillery, Captain Kazim Olalekon Sumonu, N/16183, Second in Command, State House Artillery, Major Kamaru Koyoje Hamzat, N/14656, Commanding Officer, State House Military Intelligence, Major General T.S. Adiola, N/12860, Commanding Officer, State House Armament, and Lieutenant A. Aminu, N/18578, Second in Command, State House Armament. Meanwhile, Adeni Adewale was appointed as the Acting Controller General of Customs. He was appointed in place of the former CG, Hamid Ali. And finally on the news, court repeats order halting NLC-TUC strike. On Monday, Justice Olufunke Onuwe of the Abuja Division of the National Industrial Court, NIC, reiterated that her order of June 5th stopping the Nigeria Labour Congress, NLC, and Trade Union Congress, TUC, from going on their planned industrial action remains in force. Justice Onuwe consequently ordered parties to maintain the status quo while adjourning hearing in the matter till July 20th. Following an application by the federal government, the court had on June 5th issued an order halting organized labor from embarking on a nationwide industrial action over the recent removal of fuel subsidy. The court, while ordering the service of its order as well as court processes on the defendants, fixed June 19th for hearing in the substantive matter. However, when the case was called, the federal government's lawyer, Mr. Ochim Emmanuel, told the court that he was ready for the hearing of his client's motion on notice as previously scheduled. The suit is seeking for an order of interlocutory injunction restraining the defendants from embarking on a nationwide strike earlier scheduled for June 7th. But Marshal Abubakar, the counsel to the defendant, drew the court's attention to an application he filed on behalf of NLC and TUC, praying the court to set aside its order of June 5th, restraining them from going on strike. He further submitted that the claimant was served the application on June 8th, only for them to turn around and serve on them a counter affidavit on Monday in court. He added that the applicant filed the counter affidavit on June 16th and instructed the bailiff not to serve them until Monday in court. However, following a little disagreement over service of the court processes, the matter was adjourned to July 20th for parties to resolve the issue. Moreover, the court directed the defendants to enter their memorandum of appearance and instructed parties to maintain the status quo. President Bola Tinubu, while delivering his inaugural speech, had announced the removal of fuel subsidy. The announcement led to an astronomical surge in pump price of fuel from around 195 naira to between 560 naira and 660 naira across the country. Responding, the organized labor mobilized its members for a shutdown with the government, but could not proceed because of the order of the court. To refresh our memories, Moscow launches massive air raid on Kyiv. Man attacks diners in New Zealand, kills 4. Ukraine says biggest blow coming in counter-offensive. Stop illegal settlements in Palestine, Guterres to Israel, and over notorious refugee policies, families seek United Nations help. Thanks for watching. I am Lois Drake.